All right. So I'm Raghav Agarwal, the co-founder of Fluid AI. I have with me Abhinav, my co-founder as well.
Hi everyone.
And we are very excited today to talk to you about how generative AI can really be a game changer in terms of really transforming your institution. But at the same time, what are the pitfalls? What are the risks that you run? And maybe suggest some ideas and silver bullets around how you can sort of sort this out. But really excited to see the turnout today in terms of folks wanting to engage with Gen AI. And our experience as a company has been quite extensive in this space, launching Gen AI solutions for banks globally, both in the States, in the Caribbean, in developing markets, in developed markets. And what we've been able to sort of decipher from all of this is that there definitely is an opportunity in engaging in low risk, high value use cases, and then building out your Gen AI muscle as you sort of grow your Gen AI practice. We definitely believe that in the next 5 to 7 years, any bank is going to be a Gen AI bank first, and banks which start this journey early are going to definitely be advantaged versus banks which sort of take a wait and see approach. So let's sort of get into this, and let me sort of walk you through what we at Fluid AI are seeing in this space and how we are sort of looking at connecting on a broader level some of the themes that are occurring out here. All right. Okay. So, the very first thing, just to loosen all of you up, you see these two arrows up on screen. How would you, try and see how fast you can get from the left arrow to the one on top. And I'll give you about 15, 20 seconds to sort of figure it out. And then, just see if you can do this in 15, 20 seconds. I know folks have done it in 3 seconds. I know people have taken 10 minutes. But just sort of a quick puzzle before we sort of get into things. All right, I think a lot of you may have struggled through this one, but I think, has anyone looked at sort of solving this way? I only said you have to move from the left to the right arrow. I never said you have to go through the maze or going on top. I never said the black lines mean anything. So, going back to the first principles of Gen AI, I think a lot of what we have heard about the technology, a lot of what we have heard about technology in the past, it's unlike anything that's been seen before. So just want all of you to sort of, just a quick exercise for all of you to sort of leave behind any premonitions when it comes to technology, when it comes to Gen AI, and really go back to first principles of how you're going to attack these problems and how you're going to build out your Gen AI practice. So question your assumptions. A little bit about us at Fluid. We have been in this space for the last 12 years. We've worked with banks globally, right from Bank of America to National Commercial Bank of Jamaica, Royal Bank of Canada, Societe Generale. We've also worked outside the banking space with the likes of Mercedes-Benz, Toyota, Accenture. And what this has allowed us is to really come together, get the best of banking, but also see what other industries do with AI to really come together to say, okay, how do we build something that will not only deliver value, is cost effective, and is secure. So we've been in the media a bunch. One of the cool things we did was use our own technology to write the world's first AI written book. It's called Bridging the AI Gap. It was launched a month before ChatGPT. It's a bestseller on Amazon. Do grab a copy, in countries where you can get it. And it really talks about the journey, right? We've used our own technology, AI on AI. So it's something we're very excited by. We are in 6 countries, including Mauritius, and we are very excited that both developing world and developed world can take advantage of Gen AI. One of the most fantastic use cases we did with AI was work with Warren Buffett for the 100-year anniversary of Forbes. We launched an AI cover where you could talk to Warren, he could talk back to you. And when we showcased it to Warren, he said, hey, you made me immortal. And that's what AI can do, right? That's the power of Gen AI, wherein we took on all the knowledge, all the books, letters, the various interviews Warren gave. We created this AI avatar out of him, which you could speak to and he could speak back to you. So now, what if a 15,000 people bank behaved like it had 100,000 people? What if for your growth, you guys didn't need to hire more people, but just needed the right technology? That's possible with GenAI. I'd like to give you the example of Citizens Financial Bank in Rhode Island. This is a bank which is much smaller than the big six in the US, which is JP Morgan, Citi, Wells Fargo. And it's a small regional bank which has 15,000 people. But today, with 90 GenAI use cases being trialed through this bank, they feel that they can behave like these 100,000, 200,000 strong behemoths without having to hire a single more person. That's possible with GenAI. But I know what all of you must be saying. Hey, Raghav, that's great. They've launched 90 use cases. But what's step 0? What's step 1 on this journey? And I think the two most important things that we feel on any GenAI journey is educate. Educate your teams to start using GenAI today. When we go into banks, when we go into all these regulated industries, what we are surprised to see is less than 10 to 15% of the folks are using GenAI on the daily basis because they're scared about security, they're scared about privacy, and a lot of them don't have the muscle memory. Right? They've been working in your organization for 10, 15 years. So it's so much easier to just do things the old way without taking advantage of this powerful technology. What we are saying is, with the right kind of training programs, helping people sort through of what is secure, what is not, what can be potentially done with a public LLM like ChatGPT or Anthropic, it's possible to get these advantages. It needs education, but you can actually change the muscle memory of folks to sort of start using GenAI. So that's step 1, and give everyone access to it. I think a lot of organizations are rolling it out very slowly, or it's in bits and pieces. But it's when with education, when with courses or online, and our leadership talking about it, when we encourage everyone to sort of engage with GenAI, that's when we come back and say, hey, people will come back and say, hey, there are opportunities in my line of business to do this more deeply. And that's what you want to do with this. I think when it comes to education, workshops have been one of the most powerful ways to introduce this. When people come together in a room and say, hey, I've been using GenAI to do X, Y, and Z, and other folks in the room are like, I can do that too. So it's not just about getting external consultants or, agencies to do this. It's just putting 10 people in a room and says, who's making the best use of GenAI right now, and actually, sort of cross-pollinating that. So that's when you're using something like a public LLM, you're using something like ChatGPT. But how do we then sort of go through this framework and say, hey, now that we want to level up to something more intense, something that comes within the bag, something that's led by IT, maybe our very own GenAI platform, maybe a bank GPT. How does that happen? How do we select the right use cases? For that, we've come up with this AI framework, which sort of segregates use cases on 2 axes. There's the business value axis and the feasibility axis. Abhinav, would you like to talk about this?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Raghav. So typically what you want to do, and I think some folks in the banking space do this really well, is they'll calculate the ROI of any use case, right? And that's what the left axis is about, the business value. So is it getting me enhanced revenue? Is it saving me cost? And if it is, and that quantum is large, it's high on that scale. If it isn't, it's slightly lower on that business value scale. The other side, which is feasibility, is actually quite interesting because you break that down into 2 further parts. So there's technical feasibility and there's process feasibility. So technical feasibility is, hey, I have a use case. Is it technically possible for the AIs today to do this? And if it is, then it scores high on technical feasibility. If it's no, it scores low. Process feasibility is actually a super interesting one because over there, you're actually judging how well that use case will fit into your process. And the way you judge process feasibility is by saying, okay, when I introduce this new technology, how much of my teams or customers will need to change the way of work, right? And if they don't need to change much, then process feasibility is super high. If they need to change a lot, then process feasibility is super low. So let me give you an example, right? Let's say you're automating a call center and you're saying, okay, can we use GenAI? I have a lot of calls coming in, emails coming in, messages coming in, and I need to automate this call center to make it GenAI enabled. the business value is high because you're saving a lot of cost, right? And you're kind of going to improve your response times to customers. So that's that side. The technical feasibility today, there are, and at Fluid we provide these solutions as well really well, where they can very effectively answer customers' questions, look up systems, even give them things like balance or redressals to, let's say, a credit card fraud, etc. So the tech feasibility is there. And process feasibility here means that, let's say a customer emails, is it that the AI is just responding back to the customer? Then process feasibility is high because the customer is doing exactly what they were doing. Similarly, when they're calling, if an AI picks up, the customer is not changing their behavior. But if you were expecting the customer to say, okay, on phone saying, hey, you can also go to this website and then chat with our AI, that's a very low process feasibility because now you're expecting the customer to change their behavior. And once you map all of those use cases out, you'll, on this particular on these XY axes, you'll essentially get all your use cases in this particular graph, and then you'll know you can go right from the top of the pyramid, which is your best likely wins with the highest business value, highest technical feasibility, and highest process feasibility, and then you move down that funnel.
Awesome, Abhinav. So I think the focus is then to be on the top, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Right.
And then sort of then see the sides and then maybe just come down towards the bottom.
Absolutely.
All right. So, in our experience of applying this framework for banks in developing countries, in fact, banks globally, I think what we have identified are these are the 3 high value likely wins that you must start with, right? I think sort of like a cheat sheet, but customer support, I think Abhinav has been that use case, right? That's been number one, that there's high feasibility, there's definitely a lot of value.
Correct.
Especially in the developing world, right? Where you have a lot of attrition and, your customer numbers are growing up quickly. So you're sort of facing those 2 challenges, right? Your teams cannot take the kind of call volume or the email volume coming in.
Yeah. That, and I think just them, the agents being comfortable with understanding all the material, the processes, the systems, what to do next, that takes it a lot out of the banks. Sure.
And then it comes to the branches, right? Because the branch is still key, right? I think the branch death was predicted forever, but that's not happening. There's still a lot of branches.
Yeah.
And you have branch operations, which becomes incredibly complex because of regulations changing every day. Mm-hmm. And folks on the ground not knowing how should they sort of respond to a customer request because regulation may have changed or the bank's way of doing business may have changed.
Yeah. No, and actually getting information down to these branches, Raghav, you're absolutely right? They're across the city, across the country, thousands of branches, hundreds of branches, maybe tens of branches. But how do you move all that knowledge across, like you said, a new way of doing things, a new process, a new circular?
Or a new product?
Yeah, exactly. How do you disseminate that across the network quickly, efficiently, and usable? You can't just be throwing them a barrage of emails and which nobody's reading.
Yeah. And then it's marketing and sales, because face it, everyone is, it's super competitive out there for banks. You're not only competing against the banks, you're competing against fintechs, which are coming up. So how do we look at marketing and sales being enabled by Gen AI, right? Getting teams not only answers, but helping them maybe make a proposal to an institution, to a company to get their business, or cross-selling something, right? You're a salesperson who works typically with businesses, but someone says, hey, can you help me with a home loan? Yeah. And then you need to have that fact, right? That data point, that what's the interest rate, what are the terms? Because you're going to lose that sale if you're not going to answer, right?
True. Absolutely. Yeah. And there's so many products, like you said, right? It's just hard to keep up all the time.
Yeah, I think JP Morgan has 50 credit cards, right? So imagine just having to sort through which is the right credit card for you.
Yeah.
So these are the key use cases, and I would love for us to sort of, just show maybe a quick sliver of that in action. Just to show folks what's possible using Gen AI. So we just set it up. We're going to take less than 2 minutes. The information we have connected to the system is all the information of these different banks. We've also connected to some systems at the back end. And let's imagine there's a phone call coming in, right? And someone's asking, hey, what is the annual fee? Let me just turn off the tools. What is the annual fee on the Chase Freedom Flex credit card? Now, bear in mind, JP Morgan Chase has 50 credit cards, right? Yeah. And the annual fees keep changing every 6 months.
Right.
And this is a question that maybe a support agent's got on the call. He's going to take 3-4 minutes to get this answer. But with GenAI, what's possible right now is within a 0.2 second gap, we've got a crisp answer. We've also got the documentation where this is coming from. So we're sure that the answer is correct. There's no hallucination. Yeah. All those risks are sort of gone away. And then we sort of, let's say, you're in a marketing situation, okay, right? And someone's asking, okay, can you tell me the features of another Chase card? Let's say the Chase Sapphire card. Chase Sapphire card features and benefits. And okay, so it's told me about that it's a $300 annual card, 10x points, and you can even get 1,300 VIP launches. And then I can go ahead and say, okay, great, that's good information. I can sort of provide that. I've got my green tick, so there's no hallucination happening. And we go ahead and just have that conversation going. And so we have support, we have marketing, and then let's say you're in a branch. Mm-hmm. And someone's saying, okay, let's just change the context from Chase's credit cards. Yeah. And let's say you're in a branch. Mm-hmm. And someone comes to you and says, hey, I want to open a letter of credit. Mm-hmm. And that's not something that happens every day, right? In a branch, you may be doing teller operations, etc. But a letter of credit is a complex piece of work. Yeah. And you're someone who's just joined the bank 2 months ago. And you're like, I'm going to have to read up that 200-page manual and maybe find the SOP or find someone who's done this before and waste half an hour of both of us sort of interacting on how to do this. Yeah. Yeah. Versus sort of just going in the system and saying, okay, how do I issue an LC? And you're getting a step-by-step guide, which is 3 steps from the system, which is sort of sorting that out to you. And it's also giving you the safeguards, right? What are the safeguards you need and all of that, right? So how powerful is that for someone who's 2 months in to sort of actually be able to do an LC issuance? And then he or she has access to the actual document on how an LC works. So that's how we are looking at these use cases. But I think one more exciting thing is voice, right? I mean, maybe we want to talk through it before we sort of go into the demo in terms of how voice can be a great differentiator in general.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think with the slew of new models that are available today and the new capabilities on the GenAI side, you can suddenly now enable some phenomenal use cases on voice. And the reason you can do that is the AI is, each conversation is unique. It's extremely intelligent. It sounds very, very human, as you're going to see in a few seconds. And it's just able to take over the call, right? Be the first point of contact that gets the call, look up your core systems if needed, answer the customer's questions, get his work done. And if they can't solve it, hand it over to an agent. And it's almost become like you've hired these additional agents, almost AI agents, that come in. They don't change any of your processes. You don't need to change any technology because you can just use your existing call center platform. They sit on top of that. And suddenly you're handling calls at a much faster response time. The quality of answers is much more accurate. It's instant. There's no training. It scales. So if you suddenly have a barrage of calls coming in, it's all being handled. And whatever's not being handled is forwarded over to the agent.
So let's check out a call in action, right? I think that'll be great. Let's sort of actually play out a call. So awesome, right? So that's an actual call that you're able to do with this technology, right? Yeah. And it was so human-like. You interrupted her, and she just answered on, right?
Yeah. You can interrupt and if you notice, the wait time when you say something is really, really low, and that's power.
Awesome. So, as we go on in terms of how does this evolve, right? I mean, I think it's not as simple as saying, oh, we're going to automate support, right? You sort of go on a much deeper journey by saying it's an evolution. Right?
Correct.
You don't sort of just wake up one day and AI phone agents, right?
Yeah.
How do you think we should sort of look at this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You don't want your day one launch to be suddenly customer talking to an AI and things are going wrong. You want to validate. You want to take easy baby steps into the process. So the first thing that you should do is probably just you load up your knowledge in, you can connect your APIs, etc. into it, and then you have an AI that's assisting the agents. So it's just an assistive AI. It helps the agents out with it. If the agent wants to do something, they can just talk to the AI and say, oh, customer's asking for these fees. Customer wants to block their credit card. And the AI is kind of doing the steps for the agent. So it's making their life a lot easier. But what's also happening is you kind of have this person in the middle that's validating everything that the AI is doing. So the customer gets a flawless experience. Once that works, you can take it to step 2, which is all your emails that are incoming, you can hook the same AI up with the same knowledge.
Because email is asynchronous, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you start hooking it up and you say, okay, now start answering these questions on email. And suddenly the AI is kind of starting to take a bunch of emails over. If it can't answer it, leaves it for the agent. But you will then say, okay, how many responses I'm being able to handle? What's the quality? And it's a slightly easier, less risky channel because, like you said, it's a little slower, it's asynchronous, a lot more monitoring can be done. And once that works, right, and you kind of, let's say, hit 45%, 50% automation by AI on email, you then take that to the next level, which is live chat. And you say, okay, can AI handle all my live chats? So when a customer comes into live chat, instead of immediately getting an agent, they first get an AI, do the interaction. If the AI can't solve it, the agent automatically kicks in and has the whole conversation history. So the customer doesn't really get a bad experience.
Yeah.
Process feasibility is high. Right. And at the same time, you're making the
and value is crazy, right? Because you now have these AI agents which are answering in the middle of the night.
Correct.
Your team is scaling, massively. Customer delight's high.
Yeah. Right? And costs are low, right? Because you're suddenly reducing all the costs of servicing in real time almost. And then you reach the mecca, which is essentially phone support, which is then the AI starts handling the phone calls as well. So every time a call comes into your call center, some of them get handed to the AI talks to the customer, tries to solve it. If it can't, it seamlessly hands it back to a warm agent. And then suddenly that's the ultimate value delivery, because what we've noticed is a lot of customers, a large proportion of the volumes is on phone call.
Awesome. So this is a journey that we've done before, right? I think we've taken banks who've assisted support agents, moved to 50% email automation, and that grows, and then live chat, and then phone, and then it's literally millions of dollars saved within 6 to 8 months. And this can be a very quick journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you can accelerate that very quickly for sure. Yeah.
So you essentially are starting with human in the loop, right? That's when you're sort of enabling existing agents, and that's high feasibility, maybe medium value.
Correct.
And then you're sort of saying we learn, implement, and improve. We move to asynchronous like email, and then we increase complexity, but we get massive value through phone call and live chat and all those things.
Correct.
So, and one of the facts that we said was that it does unravel a bit, though, right? These are the happy parts, right? You start with support agents, and you end up at maybe phone calls. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it gets a little complex, right? A lot of organizations are coming at this with a lot of gusto, saying, hey, we want to be GenAI first. And then they hit the real world, right? The real world is regulation, compliance, privacy, security. And it's 70% of financial service executives in Southern Africa are setting regulatory compliance as that major barrier, right, to AI adoption. They're saying, hey, the regulators don't get it, or the regulators get it, but they want that safety security which old IT systems had.
Correct.
So how do you think, and then it's not just regulatory compliance, there's data security concerns. Data is so critical and customers are so sensitive about it. And there's this general slow adoption of digital across the region, right?
Yeah.
Do you think on-prem is one of those ways that we can solve from AI, on-prem AI?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the biggest challenge most compliance and bank teams have is, right, where is the data going, who's learning from it, and you're essentially dealing with a lot of private data, right? PII, personally identifiable data, bank account balances, account numbers, etc. So the fastest way to get through compliance, get a solution, and have the personal security, right? Like you should be able to sleep well at night. And that's through deploying it on premise. Because once you put everything, right, and you can see it in this here, there are these 4 components: the GPT database, the document store, the engine itself, the language model. You take all of that and you put that in the customer's cloud, right, or the bank's infrastructure on premise. It's very easy to get sign-offs. The solution is super secure.
You're regulatory compliant in all ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And none of the data ever leaves the organization. So you know for a fact that nothing's happening with your data. Yeah. And you're able to deliver this amazing service as well. So it really shoots the speed of what you're delivering.
And I think one of the concerns is a model learning from my data, right? Like, that's major, right? Yeah. No model should be learning from private data of my customers or my bank.
Yeah.
And this solves that, right? Because the large language model is on-prem, and no data is going back to some super cloud for some massive training. It's on your premise. So you keep getting the best of the models, which may be a Llama or Falcon or whatever, but it's on your prem. So there's nothing going back to the outside world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And isn't it also, when you talk about on-prem AI, it's also a very cost-efficient way of doing things, right?
Yeah. I think, that's one of the major trends we're seeing, that, everyone did this move from on-prem, we have to move to cloud. And then they saw so many expenses that they didn't foresee, right? Egress costs, storage costs, networking costs. But even the core hardware, right? Let's say you buy a GPU server, or you rent one on the cloud. It's really expensive because the cloud provider is essentially trying to get all the money back in like 1.5 to 2 years. So if you buy, let's say, an NVIDIA H100 chip on the cloud, within about 1.5 years, you've paid almost the entire amount for buying an H100 chip on your premise. So the cost arbitrage of going on-prem is actually quite high. Like you could buy a chip and run it for 5 years and end up paying the same amount of cost on cloud, would be 3 to 4 times that cost over that 5-year period. So the cost saving is phenomenal.
And also from a budgeting aspect, right? Yeah. Because, let's say your solution takes off.
Correct.
And you're suddenly paying for millions of tokens.
Yeah.
And you budgeted a use case, but it's doing well, but it's hitting your budget, right?
Correct.
So in terms of, but with this on-prem, you're okay, right? You're like, I'm not paying per token. I'm just paying for, I'm paying for capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A lot of the organizations get caught in like, okay, the solution didn't work, so we failed. Or it worked too well, so we failed.
Yeah.
And that's a really bad game to play, right? Where it's almost like whatever you do, you fail.
Yeah.
And that happens sometimes because, like you said, like if your consumption's through the roof on cloud and you're just paying per token, per message, per API call, the cost can go phenomenally high.
And there's governance, right? Because everything is being governed by your IT policies, by your laws, regulation. So there's complete governance which you sort of provide, not just to yourself, but your regulators.
Yeah.
So I think, banks are already struggling with profitability. It can become expensive if not managed carefully. And this on-prem can be one of those solutions.
Correct.
Yeah. What about concurrent users, right? I think a lot of GenAI solutions out there today are pricing it per named user, right? They say, hey, you're a bank, you have 700 users, $20 per user, you suddenly pay $14,000 a month.
Yeah.
Do you think their ideas are on concurrent pricing?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And when you look at a bank, let's say in that size range, right? Everything from a 50 to 5,000. Not everyone's going to use the platform, right? That's just human behavior. Like you could take the most.
It's like the bell curve on screen.
Yeah, absolutely. You could take the best platform in the world, and you'll still have power users, you'll have non-users, and you'll have the middle folks that are kind of using it. And you're still getting the impact, but if you could price it in such a way that you're not ending up paying a whole lot of money for folks that aren't using it, which is fundamentally destroying your ROI, I think that kind of pricing model really makes it a very ROI friendly solution and just helps you drive value, give it to everyone. And you're not like, I've gone to organizations where they're like, oh, half of my team has access because they really need it, and the other half we didn't want to pay for. And that's just a really bad system a bad ethic to set up.
Right.
So can you give it to everyone, but without having that risk?
Right. And then you see who maybe someone you didn't expect becomes a power user and drives it in a department where you never thought GenAI was applicable.
Correct.
Yeah. So where do folks go from here, right? I think we've talked a lot about GenAI but how do you sort of weave together this architecture, this story, this dream, right? And I think you would tell me this wonderful story about Sydney Opera House and Guggenheim, if you could share it with folks on the webinar.
Absolutely. So these are two of the most iconic buildings out there, right? The Sydney Opera House and the Guggenheim Museum. I think architecturally one of the most beautiful, two most beautiful, one in Australia, one in New York. But there's one difference, right? One of them, spoiler alert, the Sydney Opera House, was 10 times over budget and 8 years late, whereas the Guggenheim Museum was made 5% under budget and on time. And there's a very small difference. So they both had a competition, right, of selecting the right approach. Sydney Opera House said, okay, we'll give the winning design, we'll select the winning design. And so there was this architect that drew the beautiful sailboat design, submitted it. The judges saw it and like, wow, this is amazing. Let's do this. And then, 2 months later, they broke ground. And then they started making it. And they started going through all these things like, oh, wow, this is like incredibly hard to make. And, what about the structural integrity and how will the sails last? And that's when they ran into trouble. With the Guggenheim Museum, they picked the winning architect. And that architect first kind of took a big room, like kind of like an office hallway, and built a cardboard design. And that looked nice, had some functional flaws, reiterated it, 2 weeks later did it again, then did it again. And then took an even bigger room, like kind of like almost like a whole floor of an office, and built a almost 2-scale size version of what they'd come up with. And then again made more modifications. And then only after 6 months to a year did they actually break ground, start work, and then, it was built out. And that's the exact same thing people need to do with their AI strategy. You don't go around architecting this beautiful piece of like the Sydney Opera House, and this is my architecture and this is what I'm going to build and these are my use cases. You take it use case by use case, right? You try a bunch of things. Some of them will work, some of them will fail. And then you double down on the ones that work and you keep iterating. And suddenly you will have, within a year or two, a Guggenheim type architecture ready, on time, under budget, delivering you value.
So it's about taking those bets, right? So sort of playing it. Yeah. Awesome. So I think we're at the end of our time and webinar, but they said the can was invented in 1810. Can any of you guess when the tin can opener was invented? It was invented in 1858. So almost 48 years later. So if you see the advent of modern computing for microcomputers was somewhere in 1980.
Yeah.
And now in 24, so about 44 years. So AI could literally be that tin can opener which opens computing, up. So, it was lovely talking to all of you. For questions we couldn't get to or didn't answer, or you still have, do reach out to us on LinkedIn, Abhinav and Raghav. You can also email us at webinar@fluid.ai. And as a special surprise, we have launched the Enterprise Gen AI community on WhatsApp. So you can just take a photo of the QR code on screen. You can join our community. We share ideas, strategies, tips. It's a community of fellow implementers of Gen AI, which we're building. So, would be happy to have all of you join that. I think it's someplace where you can get massive value, just sharing ideas on how Gen AI works.
Yeah, absolutely.
And finally, how do you get started on this journey? So we at Fluid AI have been doing this for 12 years now. We've been in this space. We have an Ignite AI workshop, which is a one-day virtual workshop where we walk your teams through Gen AI, how it can be implemented, pick up potential use cases, set up prototypes. Happy to, if you want, just get in touch with us at webinar@fluid.ai, and we'd love to sort of work with you on setting that up. Or you can schedule a demo call where we can actually take you through our Gen AI platforms and how they have been working with banks across the world to really sort of drill down and build out, things that add a lot of value. With that, we are at the end of our webinar today. It has been awesome talking to all of you, and we look forward to being in touch and maybe your emails or thoughts, etc.
All right.
Okay, I think we have a question. How do you envision AI transforming customer interactions in the next 2 to 3 years? So I think we touched upon that a little bit in terms of saying it will start from agents being assisted, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the lowest hanging fruit. And then you'll have automation wherein it's the phone calls that are happening, it's the live chats that are happening. How fast an organization does that, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, it's really up to them, right? The comfort they get, the vendors they work with, the regulation they need to do. But what we are seeing is this journey is going to get compressed, right? I think the first bank that those are on those journeys are doing toward 9 to 12 months. But I think those journeys are going to come down to as fast as 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, everybody, and look forward.
All right. Thank you all.